Grateful you've chosen to join us today. Tell us, which part of the world are you watching from? Big city? Small town? Country? We'd love to know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundations. While Harrington's calloused hands gripped the steering wheel of his beat-up Ford pickup as he drove down the winding road toward Crystal Creek, the small Montana town he'd escaped 15 years ago. The truck had belonged to his father, a hard-working rancher who'd taught Lyle two important lessons before lung cancer took him. Never trust anyone completely and never leave a debt unpaid. The autumn leaves swirled across the cracked asphalt as Lyle's mind drifted back to when he first met Valerie Pennington. It was at Bud's Diner, where she waited tables while attending community college. He'd been a rough-edge construction worker with big dreams, saving every penny to start his own business. Valerie, with her honey-blonde hair and disarming smile, had ambitions that matched his own. "You're different from the other guys around here," she'd told him that night as he walked her home. "You've got plans." Their courtship had been swift and passionate. Within 6 months, they were married in a small ceremony at her parents' backyard. Lyle's best friend, Preston Walsh, stood as his best man. To new beginnings, Preston had toasted his arm around his wife, Melody. The four of them had been inseparable back then. Lyle pulled into the parking lot of Rusty's hardware store, where he'd once worked weekends. The closed sign hung crooked in the window. Another business that hadn't survived the economic downturn. He checked his watch, a simple Timex, not the Patek Philippe tucked away in his briefcase. That would come later. His phone buzzed. Aurora, his executive assistant. "The satellite office is ready, Mr. Harrington, and the files you requested on Thorn Investments are on your secure server." "Good. What about the property acquisitions?" "Finalized yesterday. You now own 78% of downtown Crystal Creek, including the Grand Lake Hotel, where the reunion will be held. All through shell companies, as requested." Lyle smiled. "Perfect. And my other request. The helicopter is on standby. Pilot certified, and the Harrington Aviation logo has been added, as instructed. You're worth every penny, Aurora. That's why you pay me the big bucks, sir. Will there be anything else?" "No. I'll handle the rest personally." Lyle ended the call and gazed at the faded high school football field across the street. There, 15 years ago, he'd been the promising quarterback who turned down college scholarships to stay in town and build something with Valerie. Everyone had called him a fool. They weren't wrong. Chapter 2. Betrayal Seed. 5 years into their marriage, Lyle's construction business had begun to thrive. Small projects led to larger contracts, and soon Harrington Construction was handling major developments across 3 counties. Valerie had quit waitressing and worked as his office manager, handling the books while he supervised job sites. Their modest ranch home had been replaced by a custom-built house on the lake, Valerie's dream home. Lyle worked 16-hour days to give her everything she wanted. When she mentioned starting a family, he agreed, though privately he worried about balancing fatherhood with his growing business. The first signs of trouble appeared when Dominic Thorne arrived in Crystal Creek, a Silver Spoon Trust Fund kid from Boston with plans to develop luxury vacation properties around the lake. Thorne had the connections and capital Lyle lacked. When Thorn Investments won the contract for the Grand Lake Hotel project, a job Lyle had bid on, it stung, but he'd accepted it as business. "Don't worry, buddy," Preston had said over beers. "There'll be other projects." Preston's construction supply company had been struggling, so Lyle had thrown him some business, ordering materials through him even when other suppliers offered better prices. That's what friends did. What friends didn't do was what Lyle discovered that rainy Tuesday in April. He'd come home early, soaked and exhausted after a site inspection. The house was quiet, but Valerie's car was in the garage. Thinking she might be napping, he'd quietly made his way upstairs, only to freeze at the sound of laughter coming from their bedroom. The door was ajar. Through the crack, he saw Valerie, his wife, wrapped around Dominic Thorne, her wedding ring glinting on the nightstand. "Lyle's so obsessed with his business, he doesn't even notice," Valerie was saying. 6 months, and he hasn't suspected a thing. Dominic's laugh was low and smug. "The poor bastard. He has no idea you're planning to leave him. Once the divorce is final and I get my settlement, we can stop sneaking around. And the business information you've been giving me has been invaluable." His bid for the riverfront project? I'll undercut him by just enough to secure it next week. Lyle had backed away silently, rage building like a storm. At his office, he discovered the extent of the betrayal. Financial records had been accessed, confidential proposals viewed, client information compromised, and the digital fingerprints all led back to Valerie's computer. A call to his attorney that night set everything in motion. By morning, Lyle had changed all passwords, secured his files, and begun transferring assets. By noon, Valerie's access to company accounts was terminated. By evening, when she returned home, she found the locks changed and divorce papers waiting on the porch, along with photographs documenting her affair. The divorce had been brutal. Valerie claimed half of everything, including the business she'd helped build. Her attorney, a shark named Westfield, had painted Lyle as a workaholic who'd neglected his wife. But Lyle's evidence of her industrial espionage changed everything. The prenuptial agreement he'd insisted upon, which Valerie had signed, confident in her hold over him, held firm. She left the proceedings with a fraction of what she'd expected, her reputation in tatters. 2 weeks later, she moved in with Dominic Thorne, who'd won the riverfront project as planned. What no one knew, not even his attorney, was that Lyle had already set in motion a plan that would take years to execute. A plan to systematically destroy everyone who had betrayed him. Chapter 3. Ashes in Embers. The months following the divorce were the darkest of Lyle's life. Thorne Investments, using information Valerie had stolen, outbid Harrington Construction on 3 major projects. Suppliers who once offered Lyle favorable terms suddenly became difficult. Longtime clients grew hesitant. The business he'd built with sweat and sacrifice began to crumble. Then came his second betrayal. Preston Walsh, his supposed best friend, had been seen golfing with Dominic Thorne. A week later, Preston's supply company secured an exclusive contract with Thorne Investments. When confronted, Preston had the audacity to look ashamed. "It's just business, Lyle. My company was going under. Dominic offered me an exclusive supplier arrangement if I gave him some insights into your operations." "What insights?" Lyle had asked, his voice dangerously calm. Preston's eyes couldn't meet his. "Cost structures, supplier relationships, your contingency plans for the Mason Creek project." The Mason Creek project, a development that represented Lyle's last chance to save his business. The project he just lost to Thorne Investments. "Get out," Lyle had said quietly. "And if you value your life, never speak to me again." That night, alone in his rented apartment, the lake house lost in the financial fallout, Lyle contemplated ending it all. His business was failing, his marriage was over, his friends had betrayed him, and his reputation in Crystal Creek was ruined. But as dawn broke, something hardened inside him. He would not end. He would not break. He would rebuild, stronger and more ruthless than before. And one day, he would return to collect the debts owed to him, with interest. Lyle liquidated what remained of his assets in Crystal Creek and disappeared. Some said he'd moved west to Seattle or Portland. Others heard he'd gone east to rebuild. No one really knew, and after a while, no one really cared. Crystal Creek moved on. Dominic Thorne's developments flourished. Valerie became Mrs. Thorne and the town's social queen. Preston's supply business expanded, riding the wave of Thorne's success. For 5 years, there was no sign of Lyle Harrington, until a new holding company, Phoenix Acquisitions, began quietly purchasing distressed properties in neighboring counties. Few connected it to the construction worker who'd left town with his tail between his legs. Even fewer noticed when Phoenix expanded into helicopter leasing, buying a fleet of specialized aircraft for emergency services and executive transport. 10 years after leaving Crystal Creek, Lyle Harrington had transformed himself into the CEO of Harrington Holdings, a diversified company with interests in real estate, aviation, and technology. His net worth had grown exponentially, but he lived modestly, driven by a single purpose. In corporate circles, he became known as the Ghost, ruthless in negotiations, meticulous in planning, and utterly merciless to those who crossed him. Competitors who tried to undermine him mysteriously found their own businesses faltering. Those who betrayed his trust disappeared from the industry, professionally ruined. All the while, he kept tabs on Crystal Creek, on Dominic and Valerie Thorne, whose marriage had produced 2 children and whose public image as the town's power couple masked growing problems, on Preston Walsh, whose supply company had expanded across the state, on the town that had once been his home. When the invitation to the 15-year high school reunion arrived, forwarded from an old address, Lal smiled for the first time in years. It would be held at the Grand Lake Hotel, now the crown jewel of Thorne Investments. Or so Dominic thought. The time had come to return home. Chapter 4. Shadow Empire. Aurora Martinez hadn't planned on becoming the right hand to one of the most enigmatic businessmen in the Pacific Northwest. A former military intelligence officer with a degree in economics, she'd been working as a security consultant when Lyle Harrington approached her with an unusual proposition. I need someone who understands strategy, values discretion, and isn't afraid to operate in gray areas, he'd told her during their first meeting. Your background suggests you're that person. The salary he offered was triple what she was making. The work was challenging and complex, but it was the intensity in his eyes, the controlled fury, that convinced her to accept. Here was a man with purpose, and Aurora had always been drawn to purpose. 7 years later, she remained the only person who knew the full scope of Lyle's revenge plan. She'd helped architect his empire, structured to serve a single, devastating goal. The acquisitions in Crystal Creek are complete, she reported, sliding a file across his desk in the Seattle headquarters of Harrington Holdings. We now control the water treatment plant, the power substation serving the North Shore developments, the regional medical center, and, as of yesterday, the mortgage on Preston Walsh's home and business. Lyle nodded, studying the map where their holdings were highlighted. And Thorne remains unaware? Completely. Each acquisition was made through a different shell corporation. On paper, they appear to be unrelated entities with different ownership structures. His financial position? Aurora pulled up a series of charts on her tablet. Overextended. The economic downturn hit his luxury developments hard. The Grand Lake Hotel is operating at 40% occupancy. He's leveraged properties to secure loans for new projects that aren't performing. His personal spending hasn't adjusted to the new reality. And Valerie? Aurora hesitated. She's been active. There are credit card receipts from luxury retailers, spa treatments, weekend trips. She's also made several large cash withdrawals over the past year. Our sources indicate marital discord. Children: Braden, 14, and Madeline, 12. Both attend Westridge Academy, a private school in Missoula. Braden has disciplinary issues, 2 suspensions this year. Madeline is academically gifted but socially isolated. Lyle's expression remained neutral. They're Thorne's problem, not mine. Aurora nodded. She'd never heard Lyle express any desire for family or mention regrets about his childless marriage. His focus remained singular. The reunion is 3 weeks away, she reminded him. All arrangements are in place. Your plane leaves tomorrow for Missoula, where you'll pick up the truck from storage. You prepared the dossiers on the other attendees? Yes. Most notable is Thomas Rollins, who's now the mayor of Crystal Creek. He was friendly with Thorne during the divorce proceedings. Caroline Decker runs the local newspaper. She covered your business failures extensively, often quoting anonymous sources that were clearly feeding her information to shape the narrative. Lyle allowed himself a small smile. Both will be useful. Aurora cleared her throat. There's one more thing. Preston Walsh received a diagnosis last month. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. Prognosis is less than a year. For a moment, something flickered across Lyle's face, perhaps a ghost of the friendship that once was. Then it hardened. That changes nothing. He made his choice. As Aurora left, Lyle turned to the window, gazing at the Seattle skyline. 15 years of meticulous planning, of building an invisible empire designed specifically to crush those who had wronged him. 3 weeks until it all culminated. He felt nothing but cold anticipation. Chapter 5. Pieces in Motion. Mayor Thomas Rollins was finishing his morning coffee when the email arrived from an unfamiliar address. Phoenix at acquisitions@securemail.com. The subject line read, Urgent, Crystal Creek Water Treatment Facility. The message was brief but alarming. Phoenix Acquisitions had purchased the privately owned water treatment facility serving Crystal Creek and would be implementing a 40% rate increase for commercial properties, effective immediately. Hotels, with their high water usage, would see even steeper increases. Rollins choked on his coffee. The Grand Lake Hotel was the town's largest employer and biggest water consumer. A rate hike of this magnitude would devastate its already precarious finances, and Dominic Thorne, the mayor's biggest campaign contributor, would be furious. His call to Phoenix Acquisitions was answered by a polite but firm representative who explained that the rate increases were non-negotiable, but offered to arrange a meeting with a company executive during the following week's Crystal Creek Business Association dinner. Across town, Caroline Decker stared at a similar email regarding her newspaper's printing facility, which apparently now belonged to another mysterious corporation, Osprey Holdings. The lease terms were being restructured at triple the current rate. Preston Walsh received no email. Instead, he found himself face-to-face with a banker who explained that his business loan had been sold to a private equity firm called Talon Investments. They were calling in the loan, all $4.7 million, due in 30 days. There must be some mistake, Preston protested, his face ashen. We've never missed a payment. It's within their legal rights, the banker said apologetically. The acceleration clause in your agreement is quite clear. As Preston staggered from the bank, his phone rang. It was Dominic Thorne, and he wasn't happy. What the hell is going on, Preston? The Grand Lakes water rates just shot through the roof, and now my supplier in Missoula says you can't fulfill our materials order for the Lakeside Villas renovation. I'm having some financial complications, Preston managed. Dominic, I need a loan, just to tide me over. The silence on the other end was deafening. You know I would if I could, Preston, but I'm stretched thin myself right now. The hotel's barely breaking even, and Valerie's spending is out of control. As these dominoes began to fall, while Harrington was driving his father's restored truck along the familiar roads of Crystal Creek, he passed the welcome sign, now sponsored by Thorne Investments, and allowed himself a grim smile. In his pocket was the reunion RSVP he'd sent a week earlier. While Harrington, +1, the +1 wasn't a person, but rather the culmination of 15 years of planning. That evening, he checked into a modest motel on the outskirts of town, paid cash, and used his laptop to access a secure server. The surveillance feed from the Grand Lake Hotel showed Dominic Thorne's office, phone pressed to his ear, expression growing increasingly desperate as he made call after call. Valerie appeared in the doorway, elegant in designer clothes, her face tight with anger. Though the feed had no audio, Lal didn't need it. The body language told the story. Accusations, recriminations, the marriage of convenience unraveling under financial pressure. Lal opened another window on his computer. Stock prices for Thorne Investments had dropped 12% that day following rumors of liquidity issues. By Monday, when the markets reopened, those rumors would intensify thanks to strategic information Aurora was feeding to key financial bloggers. Another click showed him Preston Walsh's home. The hidden cameras installed months ago, capturing Preston sitting alone in his darkened living room, a bottle of whiskey on the table beside him, head in his hands. Lal felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not joy, not even anger anymore. Just the methodical execution of a plan long in motion. He picked up his phone and dialed Aurora. Phase 1 is complete, he said. Begin Phase 2. Chapter 6, Converging Storms. The week before the reunion transformed Crystal Creek. Workers appeared overnight, renovating storefronts along Main Street that had stood empty for years. The old Miller property, 200 acres of prime lakefront land that Dominic Thorne had tried repeatedly to acquire, was suddenly abuzz with surveyors and construction equipment bearing the logo of Harrington Holdings. The announcement in the Crystal Creek Chronicle, now printed on significantly more expensive paper, was modest but impactful. Harrington Holdings to develop eco-friendly resort complex. The accompanying architectural renderings showed a stunning sustainable development that would dwarf the Grand Lake Hotel. Mayor Rollins found himself cornered by excited business owners at the weekly chamber breakfast. Is it true? Is Lal Harrington really back? This development will bring hundreds of jobs. I heard he's worth billions now. Rollins, who'd casually dismissed Lal years ago while aligning himself with Dominic Thorne, felt sweat beading on his forehead. I haven't had any direct communication with Mr. Harrington yet, but the town certainly welcomes investment. Across town, in the Grand Lake Hotel's penthouse suite, Dominic Thorne hurled his coffee mug against the wall. How the FUCK did this happen? He roared, brandishing the newspaper. Harrington? That pathetic loser. I ran out of town. Valerie Thorne flinched, her hand automatically touching the fading bruise on her arm, a souvenir from Dominic's last outburst. 15 years of marriage to a man she'd once thought was her ticket to wealth and status had taught her that money couldn't compensate for living with a narcissistic tyrant. Maybe we should reach out to him, she suggested carefully. Make peace. If his development goes forward, it could destroy the hotel. Make peace. Dominic's laugh was ugly. The man has no leverage. These plans will never get approved. I own this town, remember? But his confidence rang hollow. The mysterious companies that had acquired key Crystal Creek infrastructure were systematically increasing costs for Thorne properties while offering discounts to others. The hotel's online reservation system had experienced technical glitches that canceled bookings. Key staff had resigned after receiving lucrative offers elsewhere. And the reunion, the event that was supposed to showcase the Grand Lake Hotel to successful alumni, was a day away. Mr. Mayor, so glad you could make time for me. Thomas Rollins found himself shaking hands with the last person he expected to see in his office, Lal Harrington. Gone was the rough construction worker. In his place stood a lean, impeccably dressed man with steel-gray eyes that seemed to look through him. Lyle, what a surprise. I'd heard rumors you were back in town. More than rumors, Tom. I'm investing significantly in Crystal Creek's future. I trust my development plans will receive the same expedited approvals that Thorne Investments has enjoyed over the years. Rollins swallowed hard. Well, there's a process, environmental impact studies, zoning considerations, all addressed in our comprehensive proposal. Lyle interrupted smoothly, placing a thick binder on the desk, along with a substantial commitment to infrastructure improvements and a new community center. He leaned forward slightly. I also have detailed records of certain irregularities in past approvals for Thorne projects. Building code exemptions, expedited permits, waived environmental assessments. It would be unfortunate if those came to light. The mayor's mouth went dry. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you a choice, Tom. Support progress for Crystal Creek or face the consequences of your past decisions. Lyle glanced at his watch. I believe your re-election campaign begins next month. Timing is everything. As Lyle left City Hall, his phone buzzed with a text from Aurora, Preston Walsh requesting meeting. Says it's urgent. An hour later, Lyle sat across from his former friend in a coffee shop on the edge of town. Preston had aged 20 years in the decade since Lyle had seen him last. The cancer was clearly taking its toll. I know it was you, Preston said without preamble, his voice raspy. The loan call, the supply chain issues. You're behind it all. Lyle didn't deny it. You chose your side, Preston. I was going bankrupt, Preston whispered. Melody was pregnant. Dominic offered me a lifeline if I gave him information about your business. It was wrong, but I was desperate. And now I'm supposed to forgive you because you're dying? Lyle's voice was emotionless. No. Preston pushed a USB drive across the table. I don't expect forgiveness, but you should have this. It's everything. Communications between Dominic and me, his plans to sabotage your projects, recordings of conversations where he bragged about stealing your wife and destroying your business. I kept it all as insurance. Now it's yours. Lyle pocketed the drive without looking at it. This changes nothing. Preston nodded, resigned. I know. For what it's worth, I've regretted my choice every day for 15 years. He stood shakily. Goodbye, Lyle. As Preston walked away, Lyle felt a momentary twinge of something, not quite regret, not quite sympathy. But it passed quickly. The reunion was tomorrow, and the final act of his revenge was about to begin. That night, as Lyle prepared his simple wardrobe for the event, deliberately choosing worn jeans and a plain button-down shirt. His phone rang. It was Aurora. "Sir, there's been a development. Valerie Thorne just checked into the Pinewood Motel under her maiden name. She's alone, paid cash, and she's carrying a large suitcase." Lyle considered this unexpected twist. Interesting. Keep monitoring the situation. And Aurora? Make sure everything is ready for tomorrow. It's showtime. Chapter 7. Reunion Revelations. The Crystal Creek High School 15-year reunion was the social event of the season. Held in the Grand Lake Hotel's ballroom, it brought together former classmates now scattered across the country. Name tags with yearbook photos were distributed at the door, along with champagne and nostalgia. Lyle arrived deliberately late, parking his father's truck prominently near the entrance. He'd chosen his attire carefully, clean but modest clothes that suggested he hadn't made it like many of his peers. The whispers started the moment he walked in. "Is that Lyle Harrington? I thought he left town years ago. Didn't his wife leave him for Dominic Thorne? Poor guy, coming back here after everything." Lyle accepted a name tag and moved through the crowd, nodding politely to former classmates who seemed unsure whether to acknowledge him. He spotted Caroline Decker, the newspaper publisher, chatting with Mayor Rollins. Both tensed visibly when they saw him. "Mr. Mayor, Ms. Decker, lovely event," Lyle said pleasantly, raising his glass in a mock toast. The Chronicle's coverage of local business has been creative over the years. Caroline flushed. "I report facts, Lyle." "Indeed? I look forward to reading your facts about Harrington Holdings' new development. I'm sure they'll be just as accurate as your reporting on my departure from Crystal Creek." His smile never reached his eyes. Before she could respond, a commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. Valerie Thorne had arrived, looking stunning in a designer dress that highlighted her still youthful figure. But she was alone, and her entrance lacked the triumphant confidence Lyle had expected. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment, Valerie seemed to freeze. Then she lifted her chin and walked directly toward him. "Lyle, it's been a long time." Up close, he could see the fine lines around her eyes, carefully concealed with expensive makeup. The diamond necklace at her throat couldn't hide the tension in her shoulders. "Valerie, where's your husband?" "Working. Last-minute crisis at the hotel." Her laugh was brittle. "You know how it is with successful men, always putting business first." The barb fell flat. Lyle merely smiled. Some things never change. A flash of uncertainty crossed her face. "I heard rumors you've done well for yourself." "Did you? Interesting. I heard rumors your marriage isn't quite the fairy tale Crystal Creek believes it to be." Her composure slipped momentarily. "You don't know anything about my life." "I know everything about your life, Valerie. Every shopping spree, every argument with Dominic, every secret bank account you've been building. The question is whether everyone else at this reunion will know by the end of the night." The color drained from her face. "What do you want?" "Want? Nothing from you." "Not anymore." Lyle's voice was soft, but carried an edge that made her step back. "Enjoy the party. I hear the hotel management is planning a special announcement later." As Lyle moved away, he felt her eyes burning into his back. But he had other matters to attend to. Preston Walsh stood alone by the bar, looking frail and out of place. When he saw Lyle approaching, hope flickered briefly in his eyes. "I didn't expect to see you here," Lyle said. Preston shrugged. "Might be my last chance to see everyone. Doctor says I've got maybe 6 months. I've reviewed what you gave me." And Lyle's expression remained neutral. "Talon Investments will be extending your loan terms. Your company will survive. Your family will be provided for." Relief washed over Preston's gaunt face. "Lyle, don't mistake this for forgiveness." Lyle cut him off. "You're being spared because your children don't deserve to suffer for your mistakes. Nothing more." A commotion from the hotel lobby interrupted them. Dominic Thorne had finally arrived, but instead of making a grand entrance, he was engaged in a heated argument with a man in a business suit who appeared to be serving him papers. "This is outrageous. You can't do this." Dominic's voice carried into the ballroom. "I have contracts." The reunion attendees turned toward the scene, conversations dying as Dominic stormed into the ballroom. his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. His eyes locked on Lyle, and recognition dawned. "You," he snarled, pushing through the crowd. "You're behind this." Lyle stood his ground, calm and unmoved. "Behind what, Dominic? Your business failures? Your marital problems? Your general incompetence? No, those are all your own achievements." Dominic lunged forward, but security guards, wearing Harrington Holdings badges, not hotel uniforms, smoothly intercepted him. "Mr. Thorne, please compose yourself," one said firmly. "Creating a disturbance will only complicate your situation." "My situation?" Dominic spluttered. "This is MY Hotel." "Actually," Lal said quietly, "it's not. Not anymore." The room fell silent as Lyle moved to the center of the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, former classmates, I apologize for the disruption. Mr. Thorne has just been informed that the Grand Lake Hotel has a new owner. Harrington Holdings acquired the controlling interest this morning through purchases of Thorne Investments debt instruments." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Valerie, who had been making her way toward Dominic, stopped dead in her tracks, shock written across her face. "This transition will be seamless for hotel staff and guests," Lyle continued smoothly. "In fact, all employees will receive raises and improved benefits packages, effective immediately." Applause broke out among the hotel staff present. Mayor Rollins looked like he might faint. Dominic, held firmly by the security guards, turned purple with rage. "This is impossible. You can't just—" "Oh, but I can," Lyle replied. "Your company has been systematically over-leveraged for years. One might almost think you were being deliberately led into financial ruin by someone with intimate knowledge of your operations and vulnerabilities." He turned to Valerie, whose expression had shifted from shock to calculation. "Someone who might have had motivation to see you fall." Dominic followed Lyle's gaze, his eyes narrowing as they landed on his wife. "Valerie? What is he talking about?" But before she could answer, the ballroom doors opened again, and Aurora Martinez entered, accompanied by two people in business attire. "Mr. Harrington, everything is prepared as you requested," she announced. "And these representatives from the SEC have some questions for Mr. Thorne regarding certain irregularities in his company's financial disclosures." As Dominic was escorted from the room, protesting loudly, Lal turned back to the stunned reunion attendees. "Please, enjoy the rest of your evening. The open bar is now courtesy of Harrington Holdings." The crowd broke into confused, excited chatter. Through it all, Lal stood calmly, the eye of the storm he had created. Valerie approached him, her composure regained. "Impressive show," she said, her voice low. "What happens now?" "Now," Lyle's smile was cold. "Now you get to experience what it feels like when everything you've built crumbles around you." They laughed when I showed up to the class reunion in my old, beat-up truck. My ex-wife pointed. "Some things never change. Still a loser." Minutes later, a helicopter landed outside. My assistant stepped out. "Your ride is here, sir." I turned to my ex. "Actually, I flew myself. I owned the helicopter company and the hotel we're standing in." Her face crumbled. Chapter 8. House of Cards. The morning after the reunion, Crystal Creek awakened to a changed reality. The Crystal Creek Chronicle's front page bore the headline, "Thorne Empire Collapses. SEC Investigation. Assets Frozen." Caroline Decker, mindful of her newspaper's new ownership, had written a scrupulously factual account of Dominic Thorne's financial irregularities, complete with quotes from federal investigators. At the Grand Lake Hotel, now bearing a discreet Harrington Holdings logo at the reception desk, staff whispered excitedly about improved working conditions and the generous bonuses deposited in their accounts overnight. Valerie Thorne found herself locked out of the penthouse suite, her key card deactivated. When she demanded entry at the front desk, the manager politely informed her that the residence was now company property and her personal belongings had been moved to a standard room, paid through the end of the week. "Mr. Harrington suggested you might need time to make new arrangements," the manager explained, handing her a room key. "He also asked me to give you this." The envelope contained divorce papers, already signed by Dominic, who had spent the night being questioned by federal authorities, along with a note in Lyle's handwriting. History repeats itself. Across town, Mayor Rollins called an emergency meeting with the city council to announce his support for Harrington Holdings development plans. This project will transform Crystal Creek's economy, he declared, sweat beading on his forehead as he avoided the questioning gazes of council members who remembered his previous unwavering support for Thorne Investments. In a private hospital room, Preston Walsh received unexpected visitors. His estranged children, now adults, who had been contacted and flown in by Lyle's team. "Dad," his daughter said, tears in her eyes, "we heard about your diagnosis. Why didn't you tell us?" "I didn't want to burden you," Preston replied weakly. "And after everything that happened with the divorce, Mr. Harrington arranged everything," his son explained. "He said you needed family now, regardless of the past." Preston closed his eyes, a tear sliding down his cheek. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. Meanwhile, in the Harrington Holdings satellite office established in what had once been Thorne Investments headquarters, Lyle and Aurora reviewed the fallout of the previous night's events. Dominic Thorne has been released on bail, but he's facing serious charges, Aurora reported. The evidence we provided to the SEC was comprehensive. His assets remain frozen, and several of his former business associates are now cooperating with authorities. And Valerie checked out of the hotel this morning. According to our sources, she attempted to access several accounts only to find them emptied or frozen. She made calls to former friends, all of which went unanswered or were refused. Her last known location was the bus station. Lyle nodded, something like satisfaction finally flickering in his eyes. "And our other matter?" Aurora handed him a folder. "As you suspected, genetic testing confirms that Braden Thorne is not Dominic's biological son. He's yours." For the first time in their years working together, Aurora saw genuine emotion cross Lyle's face, a complex mixture of anger, vindication, and something more vulnerable. "Does the boy know?" "No, neither do the Thornes, as far as we can tell." Lyle was silent for a long moment. "Keep monitoring the situation. No contact for now." The revelation had been a contingency in his plans, a suspicion based on timing and Valerie's careful control of her supposed fertility issues early in their marriage. Now, confirmed, it introduced a complication he hadn't fully prepared for. That afternoon, as Lyle inspected the hotel property with the management team, he was approached by an unexpected figure, Madeline Thorne, Dominic and Valerie's 12-year-old daughter. Precocious and observant, she had evaded her caretaker to confront him. "You're the man who destroyed my family," she stated, her young face serious beyond her years. Lyle regarded her carefully. "Your father destroyed his own business through dishonest practices. That's why the authorities are involved. And my mother? Did she deserve to have nothing?" "Your mother made choices," Lyle replied, keeping his voice neutral. "Choices have consequences." Madeline studied him with an intensity that reminded him of himself. "My brother says you used to be married to our mom, before our dad." "That's correct. Then you're the one she left, the one whose business they ruined." She wasn't asking. "You seem well-informed for someone your age." Madeline shrugged. "I listen. Adults think kids don't understand, but we do." She looked him directly in the eyes. "What happens to us now? Me and Braden?" The question caught Lyle off guard. In all his planning, in all his focus on revenge, he had never fully considered the collateral damage to the children, one of whom he now knew was his own flesh and blood. "Your father still has resources hidden away," Lyle said finally. "And regardless of what's happened, arrangements will be made to ensure your education and welfare are secured." Madeline's gaze remained skeptical. "Why would you care about our welfare if you hate our parents so much?" "Because," Lyle said, choosing his words carefully, "children shouldn't suffer for their parents' mistakes." As Madeline was led away by the caretaker who had finally located her, Lyle found himself unsettled. The satisfaction he had expected to feel at the culmination of his revenge was complicated by unexpected developments. The confirmation of Braden's paternity, the direct confrontation with Madeline's innocence. That evening, as Lyle sat alone in what had once been Dominic Thorne's office, his phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Mr. Harrington." Valerie's voice was strained but controlled. I assume you're enjoying your victory. It's not about enjoyment, Valerie. It's about justice. She laughed bitterly. Justice? You've destroyed everything. Not just Dominic's business and our marriage, but our children's security, their future. Don't pretend you care about their future now, Lal replied coldly. You were planning to leave them with Dominic while you disappeared with the money you've been siphoning for years. Her sharp intake of breath confirmed his suspicion. How did you? I know everything, Valerie. The accounts and the Caymans. The affair with Congressman Bennett that you thought was your ticket to a new life. The fact that you've been feeding information about Dominic's business to competitors for a percentage. You're not a victim here. You never were. What do you want from me? Her voice had lost its strength. Nothing. You're irrelevant now. Lyle ended the call, contemplating the chessboard he had so meticulously arranged over 15 years. Most of the pieces had fallen exactly as planned, but the discovery about Braden had introduced a variable he hadn't accounted for. What did he owe his biological son, if anything? The boy had been raised by Dominic Thorne, believing himself to be a thorn. Learning the truth would upend his world even further. As Lyle pondered this dilemma, Aurora entered with urgent news. Sir, Dominic Thorne was just found unconscious in his attorney's office. Apparent suicide attempt. He's been taken to Crystal Creek Medical Center in critical condition. The final piece on the chessboard tipped over, but not in the way Lyle had anticipated. Chapter 9. Ashes and Phoenix. The Crystal Creek Medical Center's ICU waiting room was silent except for the soft crying of Madeline Thorne, comforted awkwardly by her older brother Braden. The teenager, lanky and dark-haired, bore a striking resemblance to Lyle at that age, a resemblance Lyle couldn't believe he'd missed in photographs. Dominic Thorne had survived his suicide attempt, but remained in critical condition. A combination of prescription medications and alcohol had nearly succeeded where his financial and legal troubles had pushed him. Lyle stood in the doorway, unnoticed by the children. His revenge had been meticulously planned, but this, Dominic taking the coward's way out, leaving his children to deal with the aftermath, had not been part of the calculation. Mr. Harrington, a nurse approached him. There's no family here except the minor children. The medical proxy paperwork lists you as the emergency contact for financial responsibility. Lyle frowned. That's not possible. I have no connection to Dominic Thorne's medical care. The nurse checked her tablet. The paperwork was updated this morning by Mrs. Thorne before she left town. She designated Harrington Holdings as the financially responsible party and you as the decision-maker in Mr. Thorne's care. A final manipulation by Valerie, ensuring Lyle would be forced to confront the human consequences of his revenge. Clever, even in defeat. As Lyle signed the necessary forms, a familiar figure approached from the hospital entrance, Preston Walsh, leaning heavily on a cane. I heard about Dominic, Preston said, his voice weak, and that the children were here alone. What are you doing here, Preston? You should be resting. Preston shrugged. Dying gives you perspective. Those kids need someone right now. Lyle glanced toward Braden and Madeline. Their mother abandoned them. Their father tried to kill himself rather than face consequences. What they need is beyond either of our capabilities. Maybe, Preston agreed. Or maybe they just need someone to give a damn. Before Lyle could respond, Braden approached them, his expression a mixture of anger and vulnerability that Lyle recognized all too well. You're him, aren't you? The guy who took everything from my dad. There was no question in his tone. Lyle met the boy's gaze, his son's gaze. Your father made choices, Braden. Illegal choices that caught up with him. Because of you, you set him up, ruined him on purpose. Yes, Lyle didn't deny it. I did, just as he once did to me. Braden seemed taken aback by the honesty. Why? What did he ever do to you? Preston interjected gently. It's a long, complicated story, son. One that started before you were born. Then I deserve to know, Braden insisted. Especially if my dad doesn't make it. Lyle considered the boy in front of him. 14 years old. The same age Lyle had been when his own father first became ill. The same stubborn chin. The same intensity in his eyes. Yes, Lyle said finally. You do deserve to know. But not here, not now. That evening, after ensuring the children were settled with a social worker Aurora had arranged, Lyle returned to the hotel. The revenge he had plotted for 15 years had succeeded beyond his expectations. Yet he felt strangely hollow. His phone chirped with a message from Aurora. Valerie Thorne apprehended at Canadian border. Federal charges pending for financial crimes separate from Dominic's case. Justice, or at least its legal approximation, was being served. Yet as Lyle stood at the window overlooking Crystal Creek, the town he had left in defeat and returned to in triumph, he found himself thinking not of Valerie or Dominic, but of Braden and Madeline. Innocent casualties in a war they never asked to be part of. A week later, Dominic Thorne regained consciousness, though his recovery would be lengthy. Valerie remained in federal custody, facing years in prison. The children, with no other family willing to take them, remained in temporary foster care. Lyle sat across from his attorney in the Harrington Holdings office, reviewing documents. "You're certain about this?" the attorney asked. "It's an enormous commitment." "I'm certain," Lyle replied, signing the guardianship petition. The trust fund structure ensures their education and future needs, regardless of their parents' legal situations. The legal guardianship is temporary until more permanent arrangements can be made. And the paternity disclosure? Lyle hesitated. "Not yet. Braden has enough to process right now. That conversation can wait until he's ready." As the attorney gathered the documents, he studied Lyle curiously. "If you don't mind my asking, after everything the Thorns did to you, why take responsibility for their children?" Lyle considered the question. "Because revenge, no matter how justified, doesn't change the past. It only determines what kind of future you're building." He thought of his own father's words, "Never leave a debt unpaid." These children are owed a chance. That's a debt I'm willing to pay. Later that day, Lyle visited Preston in the hospital, where his condition had worsened. They spoke quietly about arrangements for Preston's children, about the construction of a new Crystal Creek development, about everything except the past that had divided them. As Lyle rose to leave, Preston caught his arm with surprising strength. "You know what the strangest part of dying is? Realizing how much energy I wasted on bitterness and regret." His eyes, though clouded with pain, were clear with purpose. "Don't make my mistake, Lyle. You've had your revenge. Don't let it hollow you out like it did me." 3 months later, Preston Walsh was laid to rest in the Crystal Creek Cemetery. The funeral was small but dignified, attended by his children, several hotel employees who remembered him kindly, and Lyle, who stood slightly apart from the others. After the service, as others dispersed, Lyle remained at the gravesite. The revenge that had driven him for 15 years was complete. Dominic Thorne, though recovering, would likely serve prison time for financial crimes. Valerie had already been sentenced to 7 years. Their empire had crumbled, just as Lyle's once had. Yet standing there, Lyle felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a quiet certainty that it was time to build something new from the ashes of the past. "Mr. Harrington?" Lyle turned to find Braden approaching hesitantly, Madeline a few steps behind him. "The social worker says you're petitioning for guardianship," Braden said, his expression guarded. "Why would you do that after everything?" Lyle looked at the boy, his son, and chose his words carefully. "Because sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building something better than they ever could." Braden's eyes, so like his own, studied him intently. "Does that include us?" "If you wanted to," Lyle replied honestly. "The choice is yours." As they walked together toward the waiting car, Lyle glanced back at Preston's grave. His oldest friend, his worst betrayer, his final guide. Preston had been right. Revenge alone was a hollow victory. The real challenge, the true test of a man's character, was what he built after the fire had burned everything away. Lyle Harrington, once broken by betrayal, had returned to Crystal Creek for vengeance. He would leave it with something he hadn't expected, a future. Not forgiveness, never that, but perhaps something stronger. A legacy built not on the ruins of his enemies, but on the foundation of what came after revenge. The helicopter waited on the landing pad, Harrington Aviation logo gleaming in the sunlight. A new beginning. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.